Welcome to Trend Nightmare, your ultimate destination for spine-chilling tales and unsettling true stories. Dive deep into the dark corners of reality where the ordinary becomes horrifying. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content that will keep you up at night. Now let's step into the nightmare. Story 1, saying the last customer. Jake was the manager of a small bookstore in the heart of the city. It was a quaint shop filled with the scent of old paper and the quiet hum of solitude. Most nights, Jake enjoyed the calm of closing time, but this particular evening felt different. The store had been unusually empty, and a heavy storm was brewing outside. As Jake started the closing routine, he noticed a man standing in the horror section reading a book. The man was tall, with a dark coat that seemed too heavy for the mild weather. His face was hidden behind the book, but Jake could feel his intense gaze. "Excuse me, sir," Jake called out. "We're closing in 10 minutes." The man didn't respond. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He approached the man, who suddenly lowered the book and stared at Jake with piercing blue eyes. "I'm sorry, but I need to lock up," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. The man nodded slowly, placed the book back on the shelf, and walked towards the exit. Jake watched him leave, feeling an inexplicable sense of dread. He quickly locked the door behind him and returned to his closing task. As he was counting the cash register, he heard a faint rustling noise. He looked up and saw the book the man had been reading lying on the counter. Jake was certain he had put it back on the shelf. He picked it up, curious, and flipped through the pages. A piece of paper slipped out and fluttered to the floor. Jake picked up the paper and unfolded it. It was a note, written in a hurried, scrawling hand. "He's coming. Don't be here when the clock strikes 12. Jake's heart raced. He checked his watch. It was already 11:45 p.m. The warning echoed in his mind. He hurried through the remaining tasks, eager to leave. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Jake felt an oppressive weight in the air. The storm outside had intensified, and the store lights flickered. He glanced at the clock. 11. Suddenly, the lights went out, plunging the store into darkness. Jake fumbled for his flashlight, his hands trembling. He switched it on, and the beam cut through the darkness, revealing the eerie outlines of bookshelves. A cold gust of wind blew through the store, and Jake heard the front door creak open. His flashlight flickered and went out. Panic set in as he tried to relight it, but it was dead. He stumbled towards the door, feeling his way in the dark. The clock struck 12, and a deafening silence fell. Jake's breath came in short gasps as he reached the door and yanked it open. The storm outside had transformed into a raging tempest, but he didn't care. He sprinted into the night, not looking back. The next morning, the bookstore owner found the store unlocked and Jake nowhere to be found. The only sign of him was the note, now lying on the floor, with a new message scrawled beneath the original warning. Too late. Jake was never seen again, and the bookstore closed down shortly after. Locals whispered about the haunted store, and some claimed to see a tall man in a dark coat lingering near the horror section, but no one dared to stay past closing time. Story 2. The late shift. Emma had just started her new job at the local diner, working the late shift. It wasn't her first choice, but the tips were good, and she needed the money. The diner was a 24-hour spot, and the night shifts were usually quiet, with only a few regulars. One night, as she was cleaning up after the last customer left, she heard the bell above the door jingle. She looked up to see a man walk in. He was disheveled, with wild hair and a haunted look in his eyes. He took a seat at the counter and stared at her. "Coffee, please," he mumbled. Emma nodded and poured him a cup. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about him. As he sipped his coffee, he kept glancing around nervously, as if expecting someone to walk. "Are you okay?" Emma asked, trying to sound friendly. The man looked at her, his eyes wide with fear. "You need to leave," he whispered. "He's coming." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Who's coming?" The man didn't answer. He just stared at the door, trembling. Emma backed away slowly and reached for the phone to call her manager. But before she could dial, the lights flickered and went out. Panic set in as she fumbled in the dark for her flashlight. The man was still at the counter, muttering to himself. She finally found the flashlight and turned it on, casting an eerie beam of light across the diner. She heard a low growl coming from the kitchen. Emma's blood ran cold as she pointed the flashlight towards the sound. The beam revealed a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. It had glowing red eyes and a menacing grin. Emma screamed and ran towards the front door, but it wouldn't budge. The man at the counter was gone, replaced by the shadowy figure, which was now slowly advancing towards her. Desperate, she ran to the back door, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the figure's footsteps getting closer. She reached the door and threw it open, running into the night. She didn't stop until she reached a nearby gas station. Gasping for breath, she explained what happened to the attendant, who called the police. When they arrived at the diner, they found it empty. There was no sign of the man or the shadowy figure. Emma quit her job the next day. She couldn't shake the memory of that night, and she never went near the diner again. The place eventually closed down, and locals whispered about the strange occurrences that drove it out of business. Story 3. The Library's Secret. Lena was a college student working part-time at the campus library. It was a quiet job, perfect for studying and earning some extra money. She often took the closing shift, enjoying the solitude of the empty library. One night, as she was organizing the books, she found an old, dusty volume that seemed out of place. The title read Secrets of the Past, and it looked ancient. Curious, she opened it and found a handwritten note inside. Beware the hour of darkness. The Guardian awakens. Lena laughed it off, thinking it was some kind of prank. She put the book back and continued her work. As the closing time approached, she noticed the library had become eerily quiet. The usual hum of the air conditioning and the rustling of pages had ceased. She locked the doors and turned off the lights, leaving only the emergency lights on. As she headed towards the exit, she heard a soft whispering sound. She stopped and listened, but it was gone. Shaking her head, she continued walking. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, leaving the library in complete darkness. Lena's heart raced as she reached for her phone to use the flashlight. The whispering returned, louder this time, echoing through the empty aisles. She shone the light around but saw nothing. Panic set in as she hurried towards the exit. The whispering grew louder, now accompanied by the sound of footsteps. She turned around and saw a shadowy figure moving towards her. Lena ran, her footsteps echoing in the silent library. She reached the door, but it wouldn't open. The shadowy figure was getting closer, its whispers now a cacophony of unintelligible words. Desperate, she ran to the basement, hoping to find another way out. The basement was dark and cold. She felt her way around, looking for a door or window. The whispering followed her, filling her with dread. She found a small window and tried to open it, but it was stuck. The shadowy figure appeared at the top of the stairs, its glowing eyes piercing the darkness. Lena grabbed a nearby book and hurled it at the figure, but it passed right through. The figure continued to advance, and Lena felt a cold hand on her shoulder. She screamed and fell to the floor, covering her head. The whispering stopped, and the figure disappeared. She looked up and saw a faint light coming from the window. Gathering her courage, she pushed the window open and crawled out. She ran to the nearest building and called campus security. When they arrived at the library, they found it empty. There was no sign of the shadowy figure or any disturbances. Lena never worked the closing shift again. She couldn't explain what happened that night, but she knew the library held secrets best left undisturbed. The old book, Secrets of the Past, was never found, and the library remained a place of mystery and unease for those who dared to enter after dark